Started, I just want to make everybody aware that Mr. Carey, who's in attendance, is going to be recording the meeting on his personal, I think, iPhone or whatever that is, an Android. And so just be aware of that. Do we have any public comment on the agenda item? Okay. Item number 4 is nomination, election of board officers.
I'd like to make a motion to move to nominate all the current officers to remain at their current position.
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good. Looking forward to the pay raise.
Send it by water. Send it by water.
I just want to let everybody know that the board has been working extremely hard, very diligently on making sure that we bring high quality, affordable water to the over 200,000 residents in our area. In my opinion, everybody has been doing a fantastic job, and I really appreciate the efforts of the board, but also our very fine leadership staff. I'm actually reminded that about a year ago, our executive manager was coming on board and has really been outstanding with the experience he brings, the network that he brings. His personal attributes are fantastic. And I could go on by also noting that we have Jeff Russo here, who's now, what, 3 years in?
3 years.
3 years in, and Stephen, 2?
No, 3.
3 years in also. Also doing a fantastic job, as well as Agnes Wepkenberg, our CFO, Michael D'Agostino, our head of HR, have all been outstanding. And I, as the chair, really appreciate all the efforts of not only the leadership staff, but all of our fine employees in CWA. With that said, I'd like to move to item 5, motion for approval of the minutes for November 21st, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Good.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I didn't point out that we're kind of upping our game a little bit. We have a device here that picks up everybody, and when we have board members remotely, they're on the big screen, like
Joining us
see
from
there.
Iowa.
Yeah, all the way from Iowa. So it's always good to have some new technology every now and again.
Yes.
I swear it makes me look happy. But that's just,
Dang, we got the.
it's a lot close. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, let's do it.
One of our board members is a little sensitive, so you know, just.
We need
Mrs.
some on the table.
Mr. Solicitor, anything?
Mr. President, there are no action items from the executive session. We did have an executive session and an information session prior to today's meeting. It began around 11 o'clock and can continue. The information session occurred without any deliberation being had by the board. The litigation matters that we talked about were the federal bankruptcy proceeding, the case currently before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and also some other potential litigation involving the city of Chester. Finally, I gave the board legal advice on some of the items on the agenda today. But no action needed, and that's my report also.
Okay, thank you. Item 8, we have the Chief Financial Officer's report. There are 2 items there. 8A, a request to approve the expenses by function report. May I have a motion for item 8A?
So,
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item, 8B, is a request to approve a 3% salary increase for all full-time, non-union, and union employees effective January 1st, 2025. May I have a motion for item 8B?
So, second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 9, the Director of Engineering report. We have several items there. The first is a request to award the following contracts. Contract 24-019, furnishing and delivery of powder activated carbon for $575,000. And contract 24-025, equipment rental and operator for $455,007. May I have a motion for item 9A, please?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is item 9B, request to approve an on-call proposal from Carroll Engineering, which is a not to exceed of $100,000. May I have a motion for 9B, please?
So move.
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item is 9C, request to adopt a resolution to provide the annual highway restoration and maintenance bond for PennDOT. May I have a motion for item 9C, please?
So move. Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, 9D, request to approve the following change orders. Change order number 2 for the Susquehanna intake relocation design for $129,834. Change order number 2 for furnishing concrete and masonry structural services, an additional $26,373.81. Change order number, I'm sorry, I think there's a little typo. It was supposed to be change order number 2 for furnishing and delivery of liquid sodium permanganate, an additional $23,050. May I have a motion for items 9D,
So
please?
moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon.
Yes.
Mr. Herford.
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik.
Yes.
Mr. Rivera.
Yes.
Mr. Shelton.
Yes.
Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Washburger.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Before we hit the items in 10A, I know our executive manager has something to report on a recent DEP visit to our plant.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So between September 23rd and September 25th, the Department of Environmental Protection conducted a filter plant performance evaluation of our Octoraro water treatment plant. On December 5th, we received the department's report, and we received a commendable evaluation, which is the highest level of evaluation possible from the Department of Environmental Protection. So I wanted to let the board know that our staff out there continues to do an excellent job in providing clean and safe water to our customers. And I would like to take the time to also acknowledge our superintendent.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. And thank everybody out there for us.
I will. It's a good team. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to commend to they've done a marvelous job, stayed on top of it, and even as we speak, they're working on it. And we have one of the best teams in America, right here with the Chester Water Authority, all
Absolutely.
over. Great, congratulations. We've come a long way. We've got a shorter term to go, but we hope to carry it to the top.
Absolutely. I think we all feel proud when we see the CWA trucks rolling out there, that folks are on the job doing a great job, so we appreciate everything. So moving on to item 10A and B, I'd like to do at the same time. These are proposals for Tech Guide for renewal of their annual on-call professional services associated with technology consulting, not to exceed $75,000. Also, a request to approve the purchase of business continuity services from Tech Guides, Inc. for year 2025 for $41,880. I'd like to take 10A and B together, so we may have a motion for that.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Brandon,
Yes.
Mr. Herford,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yes.
Mr. Shelton,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Washburger,
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item, 10C, is the request to approve 2025 monthly board meeting dates. And I just want to remind everybody that those dates are best estimate as to when they'll occur. Things change, things happen, and we may have to move them around, but we'll post that as appropriate. So may I have a motion for item 10C?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Brandon,
Yes.
Mr. Herford,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yes.
Mr. Shelton,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Washburger,
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item, D, is to request the adoption of a resolution authorizing its signatories to enter into a CACP. May I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Brandon,
Yes.
Mr. Herford,
Yes.
Mrs. Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yes.
Mr. Shelton,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Washburger,
Yes.
Mrs. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Do we have any old business? Okay, hearing none. Any new business? I do have, under new business, I'd like to acknowledge Stephen McBride. He's probably surprised that he's getting this acknowledgement, but Stephen participated in a very high-powered panel discussion on AI at the University of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg, and represented the CWA with excellence. So for those of you who don't know, Stephen is sort of like the go-to person in CWA for any AI questions. And on the panel was these distinguished professors in water. I think one was called the water doctor, or doctor of water, or Dr. Water. But anyway, the person you go to in Pennsylvania about water, you know, any kind of technical information with this person. And we were at a conference in Anaheim in June, I think it was. And Stephen and I think Mr. Herford was in the same class. And the professor was there. After the session, came up to Stephen and said, "I want you to come up because of how, you know, your participation in this classroom and do a talk at Penn State." Little did anybody know, but that was one of the highest esteemed academic professionals in the area. And he invited Stephen, after hearing him speak, to go participate in this panel. So I think it's something that's a little bit serendipitous, but I think it's noteworthy enough to point out that we have our own person amongst all these experts talking about how we use AI within CWA. And even though we're just starting out, it's still a lot more than a lot of people are doing. So appreciate you doing that for us. Any other new business?
I do have some questions.
Yes.
The monthly board meeting dates, will that be issued in the paper? Will they have that?
It's actually on our website, but I
It'll be
think,
on the
So
website?
what's approved today, will be published in the Daily Times
That's
and
what
our
I'm-
website.
yes. Okay, thank you. And then, here we go with these acronyms.
Mhm.
CACP, I don't know what that means.
CACP is it stands for Consent Assessment of Civil Penalty.
Okay.
And basically, the DEP has a right to go back for
5 years.
5 years. And if they find something that is not in accordance with their protocol or regulations, they could cite us. And so we have to respond, to them. They're the police. Regardless of our agreement or disagreement, when you get pulled over by the police sometime and you're doing 55 and they say you're doing 65,
Okay.
so,
And you didn't hire me.
Smart enough to answer.
Thank you,
yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks for that question. Okay. Do we have any,
Did you do 12? I'm sorry.
we're on 12 now.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we did 12, I'm sorry, we're on 13 public comment. Any other public comments or other matters?
I have some. So I just want to say congratulations again to CWA and Steve and your team. Congratulations on that. And then just want to thank our leadership on the board for your work over the past year. You have been educating us along the way, and you all have done a great job. So just want to acknowledge our leadership on CWA. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
No move.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, meeting's adjourned, thank you.